Thanks for joining our session this afternoon. I really appreciate everyone participating in today's virtual summit. So our topic now is cutting costs, not corners, and understanding more about smart CMMC compliance strategies. So I think this is a really important session for us because compliance, as you all know, or as you're even learning more about today through these topics, can be quite a daunting challenge. There's a lot of steps and complexity involved. And for many, it's also a brand new area of expertise that they've got to learn about and gain knowledge of. So our panelists have been through this, right? And they're here to share learnings and advice towards finding the most cost-effective path on a compliance journey for, let's say, a typical defense industrial base company. So I'm joined here today by two experts on this topic. One gives us the contractor perspective and the other a CMMC advisory services perspective. So you can really see the story from both perspectives and both sets of experience. So I will introduce our panelists next. First, we have Paul Miller. Paul is IT administrator at Virtra, and they're providing training simulators for law enforcement and military. He has a history in systems and network admin with a focus on security and vulnerability remediation. And he's a relatively new member to our NIST CMMC community here. So he can speak to that experience very personally. And also we have Manas Das, who is the founder and CEO of Strategic IT Solutions. In his over 3 decades of consulting experience, including the Big Five, he's established himself as a trusted advisor in a wide range of industries, technology, utilities, financial services, and nonprofits, specifically in the areas of strategic planning, execution, and process improvement, as well as cybersecurity. So Manas can all provide the perspective of the advisor, strategic, planning aspects to this compliance journey. So our format here will be a panel discussion. We're going to take about 30 minutes to discuss and talk about a few different topics, all relative to understanding the cost and complexity of compliance and how to find a better way forward. So Manas, I'm going to start with you. So let's start at the beginning. Where do you start when a defense industrial based contractor is beginning their CMMC compliance journey? What common mistakes are made at this early phase?
Yeah. First of all, I'm honored to be here in this panel, Greg. Thank you for the opportunity. So I come from a strategy background, strategy and process background. So I look at everything, including CMMC, from a strategic standpoint. So first thing I look at is that when I talk to my clients, I ask them, why are you doing CMMC? How is it aligned with your strategic goals? So for some of these companies, it is inevitable because they already have duty contracts with CY in scope. So there is a sustainability question for them. For the other companies, other deep companies, it is more of a growth question. It is a competitive advantage for them if they want to get into DoD, and they have to plan around that and establish the CMMC infrastructure to become compliant and thus get additional contracts. So once they have defined that, the next thing they need to do is define their requirements. And the best way to get to the requirements is tracking their CY data flow. Now, if you already have CY in scope, it's easier because you can track how it is flowing. If you do not have a CY contract, you have to plan that out, how your CY will flow. So that will give you the CMMC requirements. Now, once you have the CY data flow, that leads to your scope, your resources that you need, the endpoint devices you need, the systems you'll be using to store, process, and transmit your CY data. Now, so that helps you define your CMMC boundaries, right? Now, you asked about the mistakes and challenges. So the biggest mistake when you are transitioning in this journey is that scope again. You have to make it the right scope. You cannot make it too narrow or too broad. Because if you make it too broad, it becomes a change management issue. It's a cost and effort issue. It becomes larger, right? If you make it too narrow, your investment may be low, but you might be making it too stringent, and it may lead to scalability issue. So what you need to do is strike a balance between that initial investment and scalability and find the right scope.
Excellent. No, thanks for those comments. That makes a lot of sense. All right, Paul, presuming that there is a defense industrial base contractor that has a handle on scope and requirements, like Manas was just talking about, what would you say is the most time-consuming aspect now, and how can that be made more efficient overall, like now that you are on your way?
All right. Well, thank you for having me here. I would like to say that I think one of the most time-consuming aspects is testing, and once you have that scope understood, it's really realizing how many little things you have to test and make sure work. And you have to roll your changes out to your environment at a pace that the environment can absorb. Testing incrementally is a time-consuming process. You can't just line up all 110 controls and then flip the switch at once. Your environment will, seize up and halt and crash and not work anymore. So implementing them like piecemeal, like one or a few at a time, will definitely eat up a lot of time. So it's a process, it's a balancing act to try to get everything to work nicely with each other. And that's only one aspect. I think another really time-consuming thing is the documentation, because once you have a handle on the scope and the requirements, it's all the documentation you need. And we all know the big one, the system security plan. That's the monster in the room, the elephant. But it's not just that. There's so many other supporting documents that eat up your time. You've got network diagrams, boundary charts. You need to have a flow diagram for your scope, lists of access personnel. Standard operating procedures are huge. You need one for almost each family of controls. And not only do you have to write and document all of those things, but you actually have to go through and make sure that you can train your staff on that with all of those documentation. Because after writing like 14 different standard operating procedures, we had to train all of our CY users on which ones applied to them and how they handle each one. And it's a huge time-consuming process, and time is money. So time is budget.
True enough. So how did you guys kind of try to make that more efficient or save in spots?
Well, for us, we leverage Prevail hugely. Prevail comes with all of these pre-built standard operating procedures. They have a SSP diagram. They've got examples of access lists. I can't even begin to state how much just having the templates saved us time and money and allowed us to be not done, but because it's never ending, right? But allowed us to get to a place where we were comfortable presenting our documentation for assessment, and the number of personnel it saved, because you would need an entire department just to do that. And I'm not just a compliance guy. I have to keep the company running. I'm an IT administrator at the same time as a compliance officer, and it was huge. I can't even thank Prevail enough for that.
Oh, thanks for that, Paul. Appreciate that insight. So Manas, back to something you said earlier, because most defense industrial base contractors we work with are not 100% defense business, right? They have commercial aspects to their business, and there's some ratio. Could be half and half. It could be 70-30, whatever it is. So what are some strategies you have seen to simplify and reduce the cost of compliance in cases like that?
So great. There is no doubt that the CMMC framework that offers a best-in-class cyber hygiene framework, which can be useful for the whole organization. I mean, every organization is not just about CY, but sensitive data. It can be privacy data, it can be ITAR data, whatever it can be. So it is definitely useful for and beneficial for implementation across the organization. But truth be told, trying to implement that 110 controls with 320 objectives across the organization is not just a big cost and time investment, it is also a huge change management effort, right? So particularly companies that are not 100% in DoD, so there is a cultural aspect to it that you need to keep in mind, right? So one of the best or optimal solution that I have seen is building an enclave, a secure enclave, right? So the secure enclave strategy basically allows you to build a technology and process infrastructure that is logically or physically separate from the business as usual, the rest of the business infrastructure. Okay. So you build that environment and you apply all the 110 controls or whatever is applicable to that to make sure that they are CMMC compliant, and you build the processes for that enclave. And you use that enclave only for contracts that require this kind of security aspect like CY or ITAR or similar kind of security and safety of data. So while your rest of your business can run a business as usual without any disruption. So for example, Prevail, I've seen several of our clients use Prevail, and that they are able to build that subset of environment where they can apply all the controls. So it makes it much more easier for them to apply the controls and processes, and it allows them to, they can call it the DoD practice, and they implement or execute the DoD contracts from that enclave, makes it easier, and your CMMC assessment scope boundary significantly diminishes. It is only to the enclave and some additional processes. Now, when you are designing or implementing a secure enclave, though, Greg, I would recommend look at a few significant factors, like it should have a strong technology backbone, right? It should be easy to use. It will be easy to maintain, right? Well, it will have a reasonable cost of ownership. And most important, scalability, because companies are investing in the CMMC effort, not because they have to always, they also want to make it a business value proposition and grow. And you cannot grow if your enclave is not scalable. So that I would highly recommend an enclave strategy for those kind of companies who are not 100% DoD, or even if they are 100% DoD, and in future they want to diversify into non-DoD contracts or even commercial contracts as well.
That makes a lot of sense. Yep. Yeah. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Manas. So, Paul, did you folks choose an enclave approach?
Yeah, we chose an enclave approach. We use Prevail as our enclave.
Excellent. So again, same kind of goals where you're thinking towards simplifying scope and reducing costs, right? That's usually the driving
for us
rationale.
Yeah, the practical separation of an enclave for us was a game changer. Like Manas said, we don't have 100%, DoD. So it allowed us to separate our CUI logically, but also integrate the use of it systematically through the company. And the fact that it's stored in the enclave allows us to offload so much and gives us a lot of peace of mind knowing that the information we need to protect is protected. And monitoring is so much easier with an enclave, for us at least. Some of the requirements for monitoring access to and from the data are difficult with modern file systems that, unless you have like a third party set aside just for that purpose. And with an enclave approach, we can monitor the access and separate, access to that data with ease. And it's just one of the benefits of the enclave. And, as a small, medium business, enclave really allowed us to do more with less. With Prevail for us, supporting us, we were able to focus more on our business and less on the things that, don't help us provide our goods and services to our customers. So we can, rest easier knowing that our enclave has a team of experts, helping to support us. And the cost savings can't just be measured in the dollar amount that we pay for that enclave, but like the hours and hours of labor, support, training, and maintenance that are saved by us choosing to use that enclave over trying to support it with a team that is already trying to do more than they can fit into 1 week. And we used Prevail's templates, like I spoke to earlier, and we also used their video training service. Was really great. There are interviews with experts addressing the most commonly not met requirements, and they just really helped me as a compliance lead, be confident that the way we address those controls would be adequate with the enclave.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's a great, compelling story for sure. So, Anas, we were talking about documenting procedures and the required documentation like system security plan. There's a lot of things here, and it can be hundreds of pages when in its totality. So what advice do you have for a defense industrial based contractor that is really thinking about how to best approach documenting their program, how to make that as efficient as possible?
One phrase, Greg, keep it simple. So for what I believe is that, let's face it, many companies are lacking many of these processes that are required for CMMC, right? So particularly if they're not in the DoD space already and have this NIST 800 171 controls already in place, right? So these policies and procedures, they're not just documentation. They must also be practiced within the organization. They must be the part of the organizational culture or the enclave, whatever structure or whatever strategy you go with. So my suggestion is stay honest to what you need and what you can manage while meeting the CMMC objectives. And that will make it much easier to get stakeholder buy-in, both from the management and users, and it also will be easy to handle and manage. Now, there are a few ways you can do it. You can hire outside consultants to write them for you, but that will cost you, right? If you have the resources and bandwidth, then I highly recommend you build them in-house, right? That will ensure ownership and accountability, right? But I know it is also your time, being an internal resource, your time is also has its value too. So one happy midway is to start with a set of predefined templates or predefined documents, right? So they are already formatted with the necessary sections and sometimes with contents that might be applicable. And then you can tailor it to your organizational needs, right? So Paul mentioned about Prevail's compliance package. So talk to a technology service provider. If you are with Prevail, if you're going with Prevail, they have a wonderful compliance package. It is already pre-populated with many of the control descriptions and policies and procedures. Then you just have to make sure that you customize it or adapt it to your organization. Many of the processes defined there are best practices. So if you don't have a process already defined in your organization, that's some idea to look at this compliance package. I mean, if you're using another technology provider and not Prevail, check with them if they have a documentation package that you can take and make it your own and help you with the documentation. So it is kind of a little bit of hand holding, but you also take ownership and accountability by customizing it to your organization. And that's the easiest way to, or best way to adapt. Again, going back to Paul's experience, that helped them. So if that helped their organization, and I've seen that help in many of our other clients too. So use a prepackaged documentation, preferably from your technology provider, and then adapt it to your organization. That will be my suggestion, Greg.
Yeah, thanks for that. And that tees up my next question beautifully. So, Paul, what about technology? We talked a lot about documentation and process and enclaves, but 800-171 is not prescriptive. There are many, many ways to meet these requirements. So what was your process for selecting a technology and figuring out how you were going to protect CUI in your organization?
So for us, compatibility with the current environment was extremely important. We wanted to meet all of the requirements, but we wanted to do so in such a way that we didn't upend all of our systems and workflows in the environment for the sake of compliance. Because it's pretty easy for me as a security and compliance guy to come in and say, this is how you're going to do everything because this meets all my controls. But if I did that, I was going to disrupt our ability to provide our end product, and we still need to do business. And while some disruptions are inevitable and things will change, and we all know how much people like change, there's still a lot of ways to work within the environment and using technology to get things done. And a lot of that goes back to training and helping end users understand why they need to do this and how you're going to do it with them and how the technology is going to change with them. And it's very much a team effort. For me, familiarity and expertise are a big part of choosing that right technology. For example, in my environment, I have a lot of group policy experience, And I was able to utilize a lot of group policy with advice from Prevail and other assessors that allowed us to meet some of our controls that we originally thought, our leadership originally thought we'd have to use a third-party tool for. So that saved us a lot of cost and effort. And that, again, goes back to that great support team at Prevail. For us, they helped us because they have the familiarity and expertise with CUI enclaves and with CUI in general, so that when we try to address those controls to protect our CUI, they can tell us that, yes, this meets that. And being able to offload the familiarity and expertise part of compliance to them, well, I would have had to become that expert, and not everybody has time for that because we're wearing many hats. And then the second thing for technology for me that I can't stress enough is auditing and monitoring for ease of support. Like, you need to select a technology with auditing and monitoring in mind for ease, because in some ways, just getting all your controls in place and getting everything is only 80% of the way there. After that, you need to set up a way to update the process on a regular basis, keep those audit logs, and be able to monitor the system so that you can show in the future that what you say you did is happening, and show it and have that like proof in the pudding. None of this works if you can't look at it and say, okay, things are working and this is why, and I can see all the things that are working for me. If you choose a technology that doesn't give you insight into what is happening in your environment after you deploy the controls and technology, you're just going to end up redoing the same thing again in a year.
Yeah. Thanks, Paul. That's a great story. So back to Manas. So we've heard a lot of great information from you guys on documentation, people, process, technology, all of the steps that are coming down as part of the new CMMC rule that's now released. So I'm interested in how you would advise, say, your average DIB contractor to start working towards CMMC assessment. In a panel earlier today, we asked people kind of where they were in their journey, and the average, or the largest group of responses were in the "we're just starting out" category. So if that's the case, and you have a large number of companies out in our audience that are just figuring out when do we start or how do we start, what advice would you give those folks?
Yesterday. So that, I know that's a cliche answer, but that is true. I mean, it's all about missed opportunities, right? So we know that CMMC is going to be effective December 16, right? So even with the phased approach that DoD is taking, there are still quite a bit of opportunities that CMMC certified companies can go after as a prime, as a subcontractor, because it will be required at all levels of supply chain. Even the big prime DIB companies are looking for subcontractors who are ready, who have prepared themselves for this, right? And in addition to that, going back to something Paul said earlier, that it's not just about implementing, it is about auditing and monitoring. So just implementing it today or even November or even December doesn't mean that you are ready for assessment. You need to give yourself, or you give your company and this new infrastructure, assuming it's a new infrastructure and processes combination, time to be in operation for a certain amount of time, because the assessors will be looking for artifacts and controls that are prevalent in the operations mode, right? Think about your audit logs, your onboarding, offboarding, and all different things, all different controls that CMMC expects. You need to give yourself time after it is implemented to demonstrate that you are truly complying with the CMMC framework, right? So, and we all know that there is a significant supply-demand gap. There are just not enough assessors to cater to the 75 or 80,000 DIB companies that need the CMMC level 2 assessments. I mean, and DoD is not making it easier either in terms of security clearance requirement, the investigation and all those things. They are taking their own sweet time. So there will be a significant gap for a foreseeable time. So just imagine the backlog. I mean, it will be months, if not years, unless a DIB is ready for assessment. So my suggestion: start now if you have not already. any delay will result in missed opportunities.
Excellent. Good advice. All right, we're coming right up to the end of our time. This has gone by very quickly. So I'd like each of you to take a minute, perhaps, and think about what takeaway would you provide for our audience today? You know, we talked about a lot of different things. What's kind of top of mind for your takeaway message? What should folks really take away from this program today, this afternoon, in hopes of making them successful as they go forward? And let's say Paul go first.
I didn't speak about it, but Manas mentioned it in his very first thing, and it's scope. Get your scope figured out. Like, don't include systems that are outside your scope. You're just creating more work for yourself that you don't need to. This is a lot easier said than done, though. Everybody says figure out your scope. If you find an easy way to do that, let me know. But once you have it figured out and you're comfortable where you want that, you just need to figure then out how to meet your controls. And for us, the documentation we got from Prevail, like from the SSP, allowed us to really frame that narrative of the 110 controls and which ones were applied to us. And I mean, if you do end up using an enclave like Prevail, a lot of figuring that out, like going through each of your 110 controls and writing a short sentence about how you're going to meet them. Like if you do end up using that Prevail enclave, a lot of those sentences on a lot of those controls write themselves. Prevail gives you a ton of guidance on so many controls, and we were able to basically write Prevail next to so many of them, and Prevail helped us meet them. So figure out your scope and figure out your controls.
Thanks, Paul. Manas, you get the last word.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. So, great. I have personally noticed so many deep companies going through the cycle of grief. You know, the denial, anger, bargaining, depression, etc. regarding CMMC in the last few years that I've been involved with. You know, the smart ones actually, they saw the inevitable and they got to the acceptance phase way before than other ones, and they became ready. You know, so they know, see, the CMMC is here, is going to stay. So it's up to the individual deep company where they want to be. Missed opportunities or become CMMC compliant and gain a competitive advantage. I think the smart choice is pretty clear here.
Thanks for that. That's very well said. Yeah, that's going to wrap our session this afternoon. Thank you so much to our presenters, Paul, Manas. Your expertise and experience is super valuable for our audience here, and I truly enjoyed hearing your comments. So thanks to you both.
Thank you for being with me.
Glad to be here.